All right, and we're recording.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Avery, and I have Juliana Odu with me, and we are going to be presenting Don't Leave Your Future Employer in the Dark, virtual interviewing tips. So what we'll be talking about today are things you'll want to do when you're in a virtual job fair or a virtual interview to put yourself in the best light and not leave your future employer in the dark. And Juliana, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. My name is Juliana Odu, and I'm a career ambassador here at the Office of Career Services. Today, we're going to be presenting about just the various etiquette and things to observe while virtually interviewing. First of all, just to run through the list of things that we offer here at the Office of Career Services, we offer various resources for current students as well as alumni. We help with resumes, cover letters, and mock interviews. We also have platforms and appointments available where we help individuals decide on professional dress codes and just help them run through everything that they need to be successful in their career paths. We have a list of online services that could all be found under the university services portion of the MyUT portal. Those are listed here. We have Handshake, Going Global, Student Opportunity Center, and so many more.
And I just want to add that during this period of COVID, that even though most of what we're doing is virtual, we still offer all of the same services that we offered before in a virtual format. So if you would need an appointment with one of us, we can either do that live via video chat, we can do a phone call, or if you would rather just send us an email, we can schedule an email appointment where we would email back and forth and answer your questions. So just keep that in mind.
All right, so moving right on to the various interview types, there's phone interviews, which are used to screen preliminary candidates. Usually, it's advised that if you are not in a conducive environment to answer the phone for an interview, you just let it go to voicemail and then remove yourself to a better location and try to call back as soon as possible. We also have face-to-face interviews, which in this period of COVID are less common now. But for face-to-face interviews, it could be one-on-one or groups, because some companies actually do have 2 stages of interviews, group interviews, just to see how you interact with team members and other people that you may potentially be working together with, as well as one-on-one interviews. So being prepared for both of those is always the way to go. There's also pre-recorded interviews. These are also becoming more common now that we are observing social distancing tips. They include sets of questions that can be sent to the potential candidates, and then the candidates record them and upload them within a frame of time. This is required to be treated like any other job interview. Getting dressed completely professionally as you would for an in-person interview is highly, highly advised. And the fact that it is pre-recorded gives you the advantage of looking at the questions beforehand and preparing as much as you need to answer those questions and upload them. So take advantage of the extra time that you have, prepare, practice, and then also feel free to make multiple takes before turning in a final copy.
And one thing I will throw out here just to keep in mind, because I've worked with a couple people who've had pre-recorded interviews, and their response to me has been, this is great. I get the time to practice and everything. And that's good. You do have that time to practice. But what you also want to consider is everybody else who you're in competition with also has that same amount of time. So you want to up your game because everybody else probably will too.
And then video conferencing. This happens to actually be the most common form of interviewing in these times. And it usually is on platforms like Zoom, WebEx, and Skype. The main thing for video conferencing is the fact that individuals tend to make the mistake of not treating it like an in-person interview. And technological problems are also a huge factor that could affect how you interview with video conferencing. So the main tips would be, of course, to test your equipment beforehand. If you know that you have a history of having poor internet connection, maybe in your apartment, it would be advisable to plan ahead of time to be in a different location. Maybe a public space with better Wi-Fi could be a plan that you make ahead of time. Also, dressing appropriately, completely from head to toe. Most of the time, we try to pull off a, dress professionally on the top half and like wear pajama bottoms. That will not work with video conferencing because mistakes can happen. And if you end up being seen not dressed completely, that could set you back in the list of candidates. Also, having a proper background is very advisable. Usually it is recommended to have a blank background or an appropriate background. Actually having something appropriate like a bookcase as opposed to a blank background is more advisable because it just creates less of a distraction. All right, we're going to move into tips to ace the virtual interview process. First of all, again, test your technology. Always make sure that everything works, your webcam, your microphone, check your internet. And sometimes you might not have a history of having poor internet connection, but the programs that some of these companies use are not what you would use every day. So you might not know what bandwidth exactly is required to run that program. This out before time is a step that's highly, highly recommended.
And one thing I will add to this, just in my experience working with students during this time and doing virtual appointments, if you're able to get a pair of headphones and a mic, that is very helpful because what that does is that reduces the feedback that you're going to get during the interview because the sound on your computer will be turned off, it'll be coming through your headphones. And that makes things much better and much easier to understand you during an interview.
Preparing your space, again, is also very important. Your background does matter. Having inappropriate posters in your background could be a negative impact on your interviewing and on you as a potential candidate to be employed. Your lighting also definitely matters. Sitting behind a window, sitting in front of a window is always better than sitting behind a window because the lighting from the window could cast a shadow on you if it is behind you, and that is not what you want to have in your virtual interview. Also, your surroundings should be not cluttered, minimize distractions. Your phones should be on silent, or to be completely safe, turn your phone completely off to avoid having text messages ping in and out of your phone and causing distractions. Also, if you live with roommates, it would be suggested to maybe have a quick chat with them beforehand and say, from this time to this time, I'm going to be virtually interviewing, just so that they can know to avoid distracting you or your interviewers. If you have pets, maybe removing them to a separate room would be advisable. And, sometimes there's outside noise that you cannot necessarily control. Like, you don't know if at the time of your interview there's going to be construction just coincidentally happening across the street. In that situation, you would need to be very polite and apologize to your interviewers for the background noise and the distractions. Again, practicing, you can never really go wrong with practicing. You need to practice using your technology. If it's a Zoom interview, for example, you could speak with a family member and say, can I practice a video call with you on Zoom, just to make sure that everything works. Again, practice answering the sample questions. We do have a platform that provides individuals with sample questions for different kinds of interviews called Big Interview that we will talk more about in subsequent slides. Having stories to draw on also will help cast you in a better light, as long as they are appropriate stories for the workplace. It makes you more relatable as well, and you may have experiences that are similar to the values of the organization or to any of your interviewers, and that could be a leg up for you. It could be a step up. It could add to your value as a candidate for the position. Also, the more you practice naturally, you will feel better about interviewing, and it could help you feel less nervous as well.
Okay, I will just add one thing about having the stories to draw on. It's impossible to really know what questions you're going to be asked in an interview. But if in your mind you have some stories that really highlight some good accomplishments that you've had, or some challenges that you've overcome, you can always adapt those to a wide range of questions that you ask. So always have, a few of those stories in your mind that you can draw upon if you ask a question that would be appropriate to be answered in that way.
All right, these are just common interview questions that could be asked. Usually the tell me about yourself question, which everybody swears is the interview question that they pray they don't get. But the newsflash is most of the time that will be the first question. And for all of these questions, it just is important to answer them honestly and not try to say what you think that the employers would want to hear, although it is advisable to watch your words, appeal to the values of the company, but just don't be extremely fake. Like, actually go in depth and talk about these questions and be conscious of what you're saying, what they want to hear, the time, and just everything else that adds to making your answer to all of these questions the best that it could be. Big Interview, as I mentioned, is our online platform that has practice interview questions from different industries, different sectors, different clusters that you could practice with beforehand. You could record yourself just to see how your performance is. You could select the demographic of questions that you'd like to answer. It is located in the My UT portal under the University Career Services. Clicking on it and then creating an account and logging in would get you good to go with practicing beforehand for your interviews. Being prepared for an interview always shows through. If you go into an interview unprepared, somehow the interviewers will know. Doing your research on the company and the position that you are applying for just prevents you from being blindsided by any questions. So being asked if you have any questions at the end of the interview is something that commonly happens in interview processes. The employers would like to know if you have any questions for them. Always being prepared with questions shows that you have done your research. It shows that you're definitely very interested in the position and casts you in a better light. While interviewing as well, you want to appear professional. Also have a copy of your resume to refer to, because being asked about something that you've included on your resume and then forgetting about it and not knowing how to respond to that question could make it seem that you're not being honest with the things that you've listed on your resume, even though that may not be the case. But being prepared with your resume is always the better way to go, just to be on the safe side.
And one thing I will add to this, because I've had many students ask me, is it appropriate to take notes during an interview? Absolutely. You want to have a pen and paper ready, and you want to take notes if the person who's doing the interview raises a good point that you want to remember, or if they raise a point that you want to ask a question about later. So definitely be taking notes while you're in the interview.
Right. This is a short list of questions that you could potentially ask your interviewers at the end of the interview when prompted. So these questions listed here are just examples that show your commitment to wanting to work at the organization, and it shows that you've done your research. It shows you placing yourself in the position to potentially be a member of the organization, of the company. And this casts you, again, in a good light and just makes it appear better for you as a prospective candidate. Again, nonverbal communication is definitely very important for interview processes. Sitting straight and smiling, your body composition tells a lot about you in an interview. And sometimes it may be hard because we all get nervous when we're interviewing for positions. So we tend to fidget, but being aware of yourself and being aware of your communication, your nonverbal communication, is a great step. Nodding in agreement and not just staring blankly at the interviewers would also definitely help. Being engaged, again, this is why being in an appropriate surrounding is good for an interview, so that it stops you basically from looking around and looking like you're not paying attention. Chewing gum or eating food is a big no for interviewing. And again, true, looking at your camera and not the interview on your screen. This is a good point because just staring at your screen just gives you a blank stare on your face that you may not recognize, but the interviewer on their end will just see you staring somewhere that is not at them. So maintaining eye contact basically is what you will achieve by looking at your computer camera and not the screen. Dress for success. We have spoken about this. Dressing as you would for an in-person interview is best. Dress completely like you are going to be interviewed in person. Check yourself in the mirror, make sure no buttons are undone, make sure nothing is off. Dress confidently. Your dressing does directly proportionally influence your confidence. So being confident in what you're wearing. Don't wear anything that's uncomfortable for you. Test out your clothing beforehand. Just make sure that you're dressed in a way that makes you feel the most confident about your interview. We have on this slide and the next slide professional attire do's and don'ts for both male and female identifying individuals. So just taking all of these tips and appearing completely professional for your virtual interview would definitely give you an advantage over your other counterparts. These are the female identifying attires for interviewing. And then moving on, making a connection. This is where, again, referring back to thinking about a story that casts you in a good light. Also, do not be afraid to share hobbies or interesting facts about yourself as long as they're appropriate. Most of the time, interviewees in general, tend to approach interviews like a very rigid and formal process, which they are formal, but at the same time, just don't be scared to let the real you show through. If you like to cook or bake bread or sing, that's something that we mention in an interview. You never know, it could be something that another one of the interviewers is passionate about, and that definitely makes you stand out in their mind. Just think of a story, a hobby, just make sure that it is completely appropriate.
And I'll just add, kind of to piggyback off of that with the stories. I've served on many search committees, and we may interview, you may see the resumes or the cover letters of 20 or 30 people. And I'm not going to remember probably that person's name. But if I do an interview with someone, even if it's a phone interview, and I find out that you're a runner, and I'm a runner as well, that I'm going to remember that. And I'm going to say, well, that's the person that's a runner. That's going to allow me to make a connection with you and remember you. So anything as long as it's appropriate, if it makes you unique and identifies you, and it's going to make you stand out in someone's mind, it's something to definitely feel free to share.
And then again, at the end of the day, the key is to just be yourself, your personality, allow your personality to shine through, because at the end of the day, you are an amazing candidate and you need to let your interviewers have the opportunity to see that. Be very enthusiastic, smile, be happy, not alone. Very expressive. Don't be, we do tend to be closed and guarded in professional settings, but let yourself be in the interview. Communicate. If a joke is made by an interviewer, feel very free to laugh along. Be yourself again, be yourself. And the interviewers will definitely see qualities in you that they admire and would like to add to their team. After your interview, this is a very important step. Sending a thank you email, not just a general one to the company, but to each person who interviewed you within 24 hours is a good step, because chances are more times out of many, they will be talking about you after the interview. So sending each person a thank you email or a personalized thank you note that is completely appropriate would make you stand out even more and show that you are actually thankful for the opportunity to interview for that position. Bringing up something unique that they mentioned or you connected on in the interview could also be a good tip. Again, this is where the advantage of taking notes in an interview comes in, because it helps you remember what they said. It helps you remember something unique that you could include in your thank you note. Also, let the thank you note be concise. There's no need to go on and ramble about unimportant things in your thank you note. Just make it concise and straight to the point. Thank them, and this just makes you stand out and gives you a better chance. This is the Career Services team. These are all of the pro staff with their liaison areas. We have Ms. Shelley Droulat with the College of Law and College of Medicine. We have Ms. Christine Albright with the College of Arts and Letters, the Honors College, University College, Judith Thorpe College of Education. We have Mr. Tom Avery, who is on this presentation. His liaison areas are the Health and Human Services, Natural Science and Math, Nursing, and Pharmacy. And we have Assistant Director Mr. Davlin Miller with his liaison areas of Business and Engineering Colleges.
And I'll just add to this that if you have any questions and you're not sure who to contact within Career Services, our general contact information, email address, and phone number, and then also our social media handles are all at the bottom of this slide as well. So feel free to contact us or follow us on social media.
Thank you for tuning into the presentation. Again, to go off what Tom has said, feel free to contact us with any questions that you may have. There also is, I forgot to mention, a Career Ambassadors team that is always ready to help students with everything career related. If you want to have a chat over your resume with your peers, just make sure to join us on our live chat and we can definitely help you out with whatever you need.
Yes, I will echo what Juliana said. Thank you for your time and attention today. And definitely the Career Ambassadors are great. Definitely make use of them as a resource to help you with your career development needs.